Welcome to the second of today's videos. Having walked from Ludgate Church along part of the pilgrim route called St. Michael's Way, we've now arrived in Marazion, and we're ready to head across the Causeway to visit St. Michael's Mount. Chapel Rock was once home to a chapel dedicated to the Virgin Mary, serving as a waypoint for pilgrims who were heading to St. Michael's Mount before they made their crossing to the island. The pilgrims would be visiting the Benedictine Abbey, which stood on the mount during the 12th century. This chapel was pulled down by Royalist troops in 1645 during the Civil War. But the name persists, marking the site where the pilgrims could take shelter and wait for the tide to recede so they could cross to the mount. An enormous granite cross stood near the chapel, with its base still visible on the causeway to the mount. The mount itself is of significant religious historical importance, with its history of apparitions and miracles attributed to St. Michael, and its connection to the Normandy Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel, which further highlights its religious importance. At low tide, you can use the ancient causeway to walk across to the island. Step onto its cobbles and tread a path followed by pilgrims, traders, nobles, and villages over many hundreds of years. The causeway is cobbled, uneven, and tricky. It is the only land route onto the island. It is open for approximately 4 hours per day. Times vary, depending on the tide and weather. During high tide, the causeway is completely submerged, making it impassable. Please be aware that attempting to cross outside the suggested times can be hazardous. When the causeway is submerged, it can limit visibility of the path, and there can be strong currents and the sea rises quickly. In February 2014, a storm significantly damaged the causeway. The damage was repaired by the Cornish heritage builders, who salvaged and reset the original stones onto a new concrete and steel base. During high tide, visitors must use boats that depart from the mainland and the island harbour. If you've got the time, it's a great place for a quick look into some of the rock pools. You can never be sure what you'll discover. The causeway is approximately 1,500 feet, or 459 meters long, which is just over a quarter of a mile. And it is estimated that the average person will take about 15 minutes to walk across to the island. The island that is St. Michael's Mount stands approximately 80 meters high, or 260 feet above sea level. It is conical in shape with the perimeter measuring about 3/4 of a mile, including the harbor, and the area of land covers an area of 87 meters, or 939 feet squared. Ahead lies an attractive Victorian building, which was built as a dairy with its design replicating the kitchens at Glastonbury Abbey. For some 25 years until 1909, A small herd of Jersey cows were kept on the mount to provide for the needs of the island. The Pilgrim Steps are the original medieval stone steps, leading up St. Michael's Mount, used for centuries by pilgrims to reach the historic Benedictine Abbey, which later became the castle. These steps, numbering over 300, that climb around 200 feet or 60 meters, up the mount, date back to at least the 12th century. Hence, they are very worn and steep. Kneeling on the steps is a symbolic act of devotion and a way to cleanse the soul. Pilgrims have done this for centuries to honor the Archangel Michael. They lead up to the summit where the castle and chapel are located. The Giant's Well. Deep in the mists of time, before there were any buildings, a giant called Cormoran is said to have lived in a cave at the top of the rock. Cormoran caused great disruption on the mainland, stealing hens, lambs, pigs, and even the occasional stray child to satisfy his prodigious appetite. When everyone else had despaired of controlling the giant, a young lad called Jack came up with a cunning plan. He came across the causeway by night and dug a deep hole, where the well is, and he covered it with branches and leaves to disguise his trap, and when dawn came he roused the sleeping giant from his slumber. Cormoran was very angry, and he chased Jack, stumbling with the sun in his eyes, and he plunged into the hole. The remains of Cormoran are said to still be at the bottom of this well, and this is the focal point of the famous story of Jack the Giant Killer. Here, it is possible to see the giant's heart. But don't be fooled to looking right, where there's large rocks and a small sign. You'll find the giant's heart set within the cobbles, at your feet, amongst the stones in the pathway where this young family are. It is a tiny and rather dark heart-shaped stone. The gun batteries replace earlier smaller gun emplacements designed for battle, possibly for the Napoleonic Wars. The present batteries were installed in the late 18th century and would mainly have been used for ceremonial purposes.